All right, we're live. Francine, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
What are you working on these days?
Well, now I've stepped away from public sector planning. I'm now working in a role as a civic designer, and I'm working more towards improving processes with government through civic design and human-centered design. So I'm doing some grant work, and I'm also doing some community engagement work.
Nice. So, what kind of grant work? Like, what kind of grants are you working with?
So right now I'm hoping to find some grants towards doing infill development in a declining capital city. And with this work, hoping to revitalize an area that has deteriorated over time, that has a high rate of vacancy and blight. So right
Okay.
now, hoping to find some grant funding to train local developers to get them to reinvest back into their community as well
Right.
as to stabilize the housing stock. In this particular city, the housing stock is over 40 years old, and you have areas that is significantly blighted with vacant, overgrown grass, home structures that are falling in, and also you have issues with people wanting to live back into the central city. They're relocating to the suburbs because the housing stock is newer there.
Right. Oh, so is this primarily like inner ring suburbs kind of
Yes.
location?
Yes, so
Right.
this city is has faced significantly population decline since 1980. So right
Okay.
now, pretty much everyone has been moving to the suburbs, and right now this population is losing about 13,000 residents a year, or in the past couple about 5 years.
Wow. Yeah, that adds up quick.
Yes, I'm at the peak. The population was over 200,000. Now it's under 145 right now.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, and kind of devastating for the tax base, I would imagine too.
Yes, as it relates to infrastructure, the tax base to fund
Right.
water infrastructure improvements and your roads, sidewalks, and even your public schools, that lack of tax base is causing the
Mhm.
public infrastructure to decline, especially since this is an older city that's over
Yeah.
200 years old.
Are there a lot of like are people abandoning these properties? Are there a lot of
Yes, it's a little bit of both. So you have out of state homeowners or homeowners that rent out. So this city has a majority renter market. You have about 52% renters to 48% homeowners. And you have people that are at times renting out substandard housing, and
Mhm.
then you have people who may buy, like you can go to the Secretary of State and buy tax forfeited property, and people are buying stuff sight unseen, but they're not maintaining it. And that contributes to that rising blight and vacancy that you may see in the city. But now, like code enforcement, they're actively trying to remediate that, but just the lengthy process to get a property torn down could take anywhere from 6 months to several years, since you have to notify the owner, take them to court, and then there may be an appeal process in between then. So it's just like a lot of factors that has contributed to this blight and vacancy rate.
It also costs the city a lot of money too, just to go
Yes,
through that whole process.
yes. So the average price of demoing one structure could be between 18, well, I would say about 8,000 to $15,000. It depends on like if it has asbestos, you have to get approval from environmental quality if it has like that lead paint or asbestos. So yes, that money that the city is losing to tear down these properties, and also the owner is is off the hook for repaying those costs.
Wait, they don't. There's no lien or anything.
So
The
it'll go to the state. So if there's a lien and they never pays it, it goes to the state. So sometimes the homeowner, they'll just let it go to the state, and the city has torn it down, and some people do have like a payment plan to like try to pay some of the money back, but sometimes that doesn't happen. The state will put a lien on it and it'll go to the state. And then the
Wild.
problem is, like, is there a way to keep that lien on it so when the new homeowner buys it, can that lien just stays with the property to recoup some of that money? So in this
Right.
particular state, still learning some of the laws here is different than a bigger state.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause I never even considered that possibility. I kind of just always thought that like when, when it's like a tax sale that it's the county doing it. It's the sheriff's department. Right.
Yeah,
Um,
and I assumed that after a fine got to a certain amount, I thought you could move to foreclose on it and that lien would stay on it. That's what I assumed.
right.
So, yeah, I thought like, hey, this guy, he's a repeat offender, and his daily fine should be increased because he's a repeat offender and he's not maintaining it. So why are we, letting people off the hook when they have this unsightly property?
Yeah. So what do you have an idea of what those annual property tax bills would be for a vacant lot?
So I guess it varies. That's one thing I do want to evaluate with the tax collector. But
Mhm.
depending on the area that it's in, it's not as much. Depending on what area you're in, I don't think it's more than 3,000 a year. So it just depends on what area of the city you're in. If you're in the more affluent area, it'll be more expensive. But if you're in this area with a significant blight, like the average home in the area, they're not even 100,000.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. I was just thinking like I've, I've seen some houses in other states, in the like South Carolina, Georgia,
Yeah,
where it's a nice house and it's listed for like 400, $500,000 and the property tax bill is like $1,000 a year. And if there's no house on a quarter acre, you're talking like half that.
yeah.
So I'm just kind of thinking out loud, like if you're an investor and you can assemble a couple of acres near, near the downtown of a capital city and only pay 1,500, 2,000 a year just to sit on an acre and not take care of it, that's nothing. But if it was 10 grand a year, you might you might think twice before doing something like that, or you might think twice before leaving the property vacant.
And I'm thinking like in the downtown area, I'm thinking people are holding on to those until something like a big boom or redevelopment happens. Like in the
Hmm. Yeah.
predominantly black side of town,
Right.
we see it being left in this disrepair. So,
Yeah.
but hopefully, I know there's a lot of research that needs to be done on how to improve the like a blight elimination program. Just like a lot of capacity challenges right now that I'm seeing. Yeah, so just from viewing that, and also just coming up with like a strategy. It's like rather than piecemealing, going like if we're going on the west side, then we're gonna tear down some on the south side. Like let's come up with a strategy to so we can see that change rather than piecemealing. I think it's more reactionary than like a strategic plan of us stabilizing like a specific side of the city first.
Right. What you're talking about is not uncommon in like almost any big city. And I don't know. I'm thinking like, I lived in Philly. I moved there, geez, about 25 years ago, I guess. And at the time, it was very similar, the
Mm.
situation. But the city had its own strategy, but it leaned pretty heavily on state and federal funds. And I kind of feel like, you know, a major city like Philly kind of has access to more cash and more capital. But if you're a smaller city, like, I don't know, 200,000, 500,000 or smaller, you kind of can't, it's really difficult to do that kind of thing without state help.
Yeah, and then with this particular city is this unique. tension between the city and the state. So it's like it's the state versus the city, or the city versus the state. And it's like, how do you
Yeah.
build those relationships in this opposing political climate? How do you, you know, leave politics aside and do what's
Hmm.
best for the public interest, serve those residents of this community, rather than, let's go in a excuse my language, a pissing match. Like, this is a capital city. Let's work towards beautifying it. Let's work towards stabilizing it, because this is home for me. I've lived in this city after leaving it for 7 years. I've born and raised here, and just to see
Hmm.
this sense of urban decay over
Yeah.
time, and then like for a water crisis hitting the national news 3 years ago, I was like, oh, this is my life. It
Hmm.
was like that when I was growing up. So it's not something that's just occurred 3 years ago. This has been a decade long battle. Like, why not get to the root of it? Like, what it'll take to improve it, rather than, point fingers and blame.
Yeah. Yeah. You, you've noticed you've noticed a decline since you lived there and moved away.
Yes. It's like, I don't know if it's like people have become complacent with the status quo, or we're not letting our voices be heard to the people that holds the power to improve things or reallocate those funds towards things. I'm not sure, just from my short time being back. But I do
Yeah.
know is that from when I was growing up, when it was thriving, to like the high school I graduated from has closed down, because as your population declines, so has your student population, your student body. So the school district is consolidating schools just to, I guess, for funding purposes. Like, there's no point
Yeah.
of keeping 8 high schools open when we don't have that student body anymore. So now I
Right.
think it's down to, I want to say, six now. Used to be
Right.
8, now it's down to 6. And I didn't know if several elementaries and middle schools have closed. So, how do you combat this level of decline?
Yeah.
Wicked problem
Yeah.
indeed.
Yeah. That's an interesting point because even here in the Orlando area, there's a big stink with the new comprehensive plan and land development code. The school district was very concerned about it, like where the density would be and how they would be able to accommodate those students. But even here, all the all the student population growth is in the suburbs, like on the fringes of the county,
Hmm.
which is where they plan to build the new schools anyway. Like you
Yes.
don't, you don't get a lot of students in, 2-bedroom apartments. It just doesn't. Yeah, it's just not where families move.
Yeah.
When they have a choice, in terms of housing stock, most people are looking for more square footage. But anyway, it when you I know you're familiar with the Bieber index and
Yes.
the,
Yes. And the rate of the rate of growth that Florida has been experiencing, just for being in the field of planning in Florida for 7 years, it just really opened my eyes to how, you know, Florida is a growth management state, whereas a state like Mississippi, I was like, does planning exist? It's like, I guess it's frustrating in a sense that people can't see why long range planning is important. And
yeah,
it's just not on a city level. I think it's statewide. It's like, you do know that if you plan last minute, and you can see that in the Orlando metro area with the roads, uh,
yeah,
it's like playing catch up. Like, oh, now we
mhm,
have more traffic than the roads we have time to build. Rather than build more roads, your question should be, how do we get people off those roads?
right,
Whereas I think in Mississippi, it's like, we're fine for now, but you do know if that boom does happen here, if this AM peak hour traffic is like this, because the metro area in this area is, I think it's over right at 600,000 people. It's like if it did get to a million, this area couldn't sustain that.
Right.
It could not. So
Y-
that's just the difference, I guess, looking from, I guess, that quotation mark home rule state versus a Dillon rule. How,
so-
like, you have to get most of your authority from the, I guess, the state here, but it's really, I really need to dive into the code here. But it seemed like as far as their long range planning, like, in most other states, you update your document, your comp plan every 5 years, or you look
right.
at it periodically versus here. It's like some of these things are decades old.
But but there is comp planning. Like
Yes,
you can
there
find
is.
some document.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the one I'm working with now is like, well, it's been updated, but essentially it's a 30-year-old document. Um, I hope it won't, I hope we'll have a new one soon, but,
Yeah.
for now it's definitely antiquated.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cause I feel like if you're not updating every 5 years and completely renewing every 10, you're not really planning. You, you know what I'm saying? Like you still want a
Yeah.
long range, a 30-year vision, but
Yeah.
you need to do serious updates every decade.
Yeah. And just to understand how your growth or lack of growth has occurred to just to get ahead of it, just working in the local government, just seeing how entitlements are important when developers are working, rather than trying to assemble this land uh, at the last minute. You've already studied that area to make sure your roads and infrastructure is intact for that type of growth versus trying to figure it
Yeah.
out when it comes.
Yeah. That's an interesting point. So, have you seen a bit of that where it's sort of reactive? Um,
Yes. Like,
it-
even from my last role in Florida, it's like we're figuring it out as it comes versus
mhm,
you need to be planning for it now because you know it's coming. You've known,
right.
you know, heck, like you knew it was coming. Why wait until the last minute? You knew this. And now you're trying to aggressively take it, but you don't have the capacity to take on that amount of growth. So it's just, I mean, I guess it's just government in general. Or, wait until the last minute to get ahead of the thing when we knew it was coming. And then
Yeah.
now, when you're dealing with a smaller city that has the suburbs that are growing, I guess it's like happening all throughout the United States. But now, what do you do when the affluent suburbs are starving out the city? Like they're getting all the
Mhm,
new jobs, the new housing, and you're going to be
mhm.
left behind when these areas grow rapidly.
Yeah. Yeah. It's gonna. Yeah. There's so much to unpack there. So, going back to Bieber for a minute.
Uh,
The So I was looking at the numbers a couple months ago, and when you look at school age children 20 to 30 years from now, about 20, the growth is already slowing rapidly. And about 15, 20 years from now, it's going to start to reverse and go into decline. So, like, even here, the number of school age kids will start to fall. And, and that's that's not just here, that's everywhere.
it's
Um,
everywhere.
yeah. And it's, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with, like, physically with the schools, but then also like how they start reorganizing them. Because um, Orange County Public Schools has been on like a school building tear. So 30 years from now, you're still going to have not very old schools because they're still building, which is crazy to me. Like I know things are a little bit crowded right now, but you can see in the numbers that it's only going to be that way for maybe another 4 to 5 years. Um, and I don't get the impression that anybody's taking that seriously, like that anybody's planning for that reality 30 years from now when there are fewer students. Like when I brought that up in the meeting with them, it was clear that they had never really considered that before. Like they're so focused on right now and schools bursting at the seams that
Yeah.
they're not thinking 20, 30 years from now. Um, anyway,
I'm thinking
um,
it's reactionary. You have the overcrowding now, but we can
mhm,
see it in the numbers, like the household and the family sizes are going down. Millennials, they're not having as many children, if they have any at all, that their parents did, like the silent generation, the baby boomers, and maybe
yeah,
I think generation whatever came after that. What is it, Generation X that came after the baby boomers? Like they're
yep,
not having as many children. Like right now,
mhm,
you're having family sizes of maybe 3.4, or even households that are less than three. It's like with the economy and even this market, or just how society is, people are choosing not to have as many children. They may have one or two versus the family of 9 or 13 that you used to have. So it's not as many.
yeah, yeah. No, it's 100% right.
Yeah.
Um, but I think one thing that you can, and I don't, it's more of a question about how it may be affecting you in the long run. But um, one thing that's definitely started to happen here is the retirees, and I mean, Orlando's really not that big of a retirement destination, but that's definitely slowing down as property values have risen here. Um, and now people are going to South Carolina and Georgia and instead, and now also apparently Alabama. Um, but
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you see that in the cards, like you know, retirees pushing growth, or like maybe people who would have left 10 or 15 years ago would have left for a job somewhere else who stay. You know,
Well, I do feel like Mississippi is the nation's hidden secret. Uh,
yeah,
I do see that eventually, once the infrastructure is improved and more higher skilled jobs, I do feel that from the larger states there may be a migration, because I know some
hmm,
people from like Florida or maybe California, they're relocating to the Gulf Coast of Mississippi, not necessarily in central Mississippi. Like, some people still want to be near a beach or
yeah,
near, activities. But I do feel that right now Mississippi is like the nation's hidden secret. And I
right,
do see as those tech jobs, I know there's a thriving healthcare corridor in central Mississippi, but I do feel that that growth could not like drastically, but maybe like between 10 to 20,000 a year, maybe not in the millions, but like in the lower thousands. I do see that happening for Mississippi, especially if you do want that slow country style living where, you don't have to worry about the growth occurring as rapidly as it did in Florida. Just from my time in Florida, like right in 2020, that was the time to buy a house in Florida. And then after that, it's like these things are 100 or 200,000 more than what they were in 2020. Like I regret not giving the lady my escrow check, and just the earnest money in 2020. It's like it was a new construction that was close from where we worked, and it was new,
yeah,
$234,000. Now that house is 400,000. I was like, my God.
yeah. That was
Um,
the townhouse that you were looking at.
and that box, the townhouse I was looking at was 199,000. And I was like, maybe I should
Yeah,
have just gotten that. And now that thing is it's almost at 300. Like it did go for 312. And keep in mind this thing was built in like 2004. But now I think during that peak in 2022, it was selling for like 300. But then now it's kind of gone down to like 263. And at the time, like 250, 230, 250, 260, you can get a new construction townhome for that
hmm,
amount. But just last year, when I was looking to purchase, I did find a new construction townhome for 317. Of course, in the middle of nowhere, the county.
hmm,
But just working for the county, you know where the growth is. It's like there's 6 or 7 subdivisions that were approved. So that growth is coming. Like what would have been a 10-minute commute is going to turn into a 45-minute commute on
Oof.
that road, since right now it's still a 2-lane road, and based on their schedule to widen that road. Uh, so it's like in Mississippi, you still can find a house. Like I was looking a couple for 159. Um, or you can find a house as high as for 400,000. But the thing is, though, you may have more or less house. It just depends on where you are.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I, sometimes I think about it and I'm like, man, if I got here like a year earlier, I probably would have paid half what I did for my house.
Yeah,
Um, and but I don't know. Shoulda, coulda, woulda, right?
yeah, right.
You win some, you lose some. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
but
Like nobody expected that to happen. I know I didn't. Like if
yeah,
I, had my job like back in 2018, maybe I should have purchased it then. So
yeah, yeah. But like the interest rate I have now, especially with the VA loan, is ridiculous. It's 2.3%. There's no way. I basically I can't sell this place. Do you know what I mean? Like
that's
even even with the equity that we have in it, we're not going to find a mortgage that cheap probably ever
no,
again in our
no,
lives.
no.
Um,
You're stuck like Chuck. That's home because like just looking in the downtown um Orlando area, like 700,000, and I was like, that thing looks like I don't know, that thing is it's not worth that much. And just looking
yeah,
at the interest rates, almost 7%, like the townhome. It was almost with the HOA and the CDD, it was looking at around 2,300 a month. And that's just for the assessment of the land and not for the structure that's on it. So that means the following year, what would those
yeah,
taxes look like when it's assessed?
hmm
They don't
exactly.
tell you
Yeah,
that. They don't tell you that when you buy the house. Like
nope.
I don't care what it looks like now. I want the following year when that structure is assessed on this land. And then they say, oh, just look around, something in the area. There's nothing in the area right now. I'm in the
Right, and,
middle of
and that's
nowhere.
what the previous owner was paying on the 2% cap. But you start over when when the property gets sold. So
Yeah.
that's when we lived in California, that was one of the issues. Like you'd be looking at a house and you'd be looking at whatever the property taxes were on it now, and the owner could be paying. They were in the house for like 50 years, and they're paying 4 or 5 grand a year, and then when they sell it to you, you're paying 25 grand a year. So
Hmm.
your tax bill is like 1,600 a month more than what they're showing on paper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you wonder and like, oh God, now we're, essentially house poor.
Hmm.
Like we
Yeah.
took it all to get in there, and now to maintain it, we're house poor. And I think this quotation mark American dream, like what exactly is it if, working a job is not sufficient enough to buy a home and retire comfortably?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. But yeah, and I mean, I guess the question is like, what do we do about it? You know, as planners, um, it's. I mean, I know there are some obvious answers, but
Like I'm hearing about land trust, rent control ordinances, but that's up to the legislator to accept these things. Because I remember in Orange County when that rent control
yeah, there's no
ordinance
way.
went into, yeah, it's like how do you, and then even when you do a land trust, like making sure that this property is deed restricted to be at an affordable rate for 30 years. But
Mhm.
everyone's in the industry of making money now. How do you um, reinvigorate that humanity into people, knowing that it's time? It's we all know that minimum wage. Let's get real. That's not enough to afford anything, let
No.
alone food, apartment, etc. Or even like $15 fight for 15. Like that's
Yeah.
not enough for a 1-bedroom apartment anymore.
Right.
I think at this point it's fight for 25, and then that's a little tight. If you know if you're gonna be paying $1,800 for rent, like let's stop pretending like, oh, we need to look at your gross. We need to look at the net pay because that's actually what I have to manage to
Yeah,
pay bills.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, I think about that a lot because like right now where I'm working, we're planning on a lot of infill development in the sort of more urban corridors. A
Hmm.
lot of the older commercial corridors, that are like older
Yeah,
strip malls and whatnot. A lot of infill there, and you know, pretty generally like 50 dwelling units an acre or more. I mean,
but
I don't know what it's
wait,
actually
50?
going to.
Oh,
Yeah.
50?
What's that?
You said 50?
Yeah, 50. Yeah.
Oh, wow. It's like, how do you get people? Well, I guess like in Florida, people are not afraid of that number, but how do you, like in a smaller area, it's like we hear 12 and freak out. It's like, how do we, like,
Yeah. Well, 'cause, I mean, 12 dwelling units an acre. That's just townhomes.
right?
Um,
How do you
yeah.
get people past that? We need something, but like we're at maybe 67% single family. How do we get something other than that? But 50? Wow.
Yeah. Well, because I mean, if you think about it, that's like a 6 story, like 5/1 apartment
Yeah.
building,
Yeah.
with parking. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's already happening. It's just it's happening slowly now because it's generally not permitted by right. So
Yeah.
people have to jump through hoops to get it done.
Yeah.
But we're going to make it by right. So it's just you just come in for your permits basically.
Yeah.
Um, but but I guess my thing is that that's not cheap housing, and like people shouldn't confuse that for affordable housing because you're buying these older commercial sites that are probably going to go for like 2 million an acre,
Yeah.
and then your impact fees are on a per unit basis. You're building 100 unit apartment building. You're talking like millions of dollars in impact fees. It's basically like on the ballpark of $100,000 a unit just in impact fees. And
Wow.
then and like if you remove those impact fees, someone's still got to pay for it, right? So you're like the
Yeah.
taxes are going to have to go up one like it gets paid for one way or the other. It's not like
Yeah.
and then the construction costs. You're using steel and masonry, and you're probably going to have structured parking.
Hmm.
Um, you've got to sprinkler the whole building. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and then you've got elevators. Like, yeah, I mean the costs are you're you're still talking like even for a 2 bedroom, you're still talking like $400,000 a unit. Um, so I like it's not gonna bring down the cost of housing. It's gonna take forever for all of that housing to come online in the first place, and
Oh,
then by the time we get it right, 25 or 30 years from now, the population is going to be declining. I mean, like
yeah.
like once the baby boomers are gone, there's going to be a whole lot of housing on the market. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
it doesn't help anyone now.
Yeah.
So, but I don't. Yeah, that's why I said like I don't. There's no easy. There's no easy answer. I don't think.
Yeah. And I don't think Mississippi has impact fees.
Mm.
I think they made
Well,
them illegal or something. But wow.
really?
I was like, you do know that's how you get um dollars for somebody's impacting that road. If you have all this growth, they're going to impact your schools, your public service, your fire,
Right.
emergency services. But yeah, I was asking about that, and I was like, they don't have it here. I think it's illegal.
Right.
So
Which means that you've got to raise property taxes, which means that whoever's renting that house or apartment, they're going to be paying one way or the other.
wait, the other.
Yeah.
It's like that 50 dwelling units per acre. Like the idea is that if you get those multiple units, pretty much when you look in Central Florida, it's like an apartment complex almost going on every corner now. So you're
Yeah.
thinking of the supply is getting there. Maybe that that price of rent should go down just a tad. That was the they said it was a shortage of multifamily. I was like, well,
Yeah.
it looks like there's one on every corner. So I expected the prices to go down just by a tad. Wasn't expecting like the good old, $1,000 a month, but at least like 1,700 versus the 2,300 for a one bedroom. Um,
Oh, so you know our friend Justin? Um,
yeah.
yeah. So Justin's been moving like every year because he keeps getting 2 months rent for free because all these apartment complexes they're not fully leased and they're
Oh,
trying to get tenants in. So he just keeps playing the game. If the wherever he's living, if they don't want to give him a month free or 2 months free or whatever, he'll just move. So now he's living over by Universal. Um,
darn, I should have played that game instead of just staying at the same complex for 5 years because they didn't go up by much. Because I think
mhm.
before I left, I was paying 1,503 a month for my one bedroom. That was 615 square feet, so it felt like I was in a closet, a cubby hole. But yeah, that's. But the craziest part is like if you're not getting the tenants, why not just lower your price by a few $100s or offer
Yeah,
some amenity?
right. Yeah, but I think it's because of how those things are financed. Like they can't if they lower their rent, then they're essentially lowering the value of the apartment complex. Um,
And
and
yeah,
so they want the rent to look high on paper, even if they're giving people 10 or 20% off, right in the door.
okay. And then, it'll stay at what, 50% occupancy? You
Right.
know, you know,
Yeah, because people are going to see the high rent price and they're not going to give it a second look.
nope.
But I think the thing here is that the ratio of apartments is pretty high. It's like 38-40% somewhere in that ballpark.
Oh,
But there's nothing in between those big apartment complexes and detached single family. The missing middle is missing.
yes.
Um, and because they're really not, people are building them now, but mostly as infill, the
Yeah.
townhomes. Um, and I mean, small apartment buildings outside of a few in downtown Orlando. I guess there are also a few in Winter Park, but yeah, I mean, they're just basically non-existent. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. And how do you, I guess like when you have those zoning um, limitations, like the minimum lot requirements, like darn, this is an older lot, now it's non-conforming. Now the only thing I could fit on there is single family, or I probably couldn't fit anything at all if there's minimum lot or zoning requirements for that. And a
right.
lot of cities,
Yeah.
they want to keep you in that, 75 wide by 120 or one depth, for single family house versus, like with the county, they got rid of the minimum lot requirements in LDR. So it made it more creative to fitting another product or something on a relatively smaller lot. But you just have to meet your parking
Oh,
and setbacks, of
wait.
course.
They got rid of low density residential. Is that what you're saying?
No,
And
I mean
then
like having, no, you remember it's like having LDR that doesn't have those minimum lot requirements. I think that
oh,
was that flexibility or more
no
progressive,
no minimum lot size standard.
right? And that
Yeah,
in a lot of cities, they're not going to move away from your traditional R1 or
true.
your
Yeah.
on your R2. I need
Mhm.
for a duplex, I need 150 feet width. You're not going to let me put a duplex on 75 wide.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's come up for me recently a couple of times where, well, first of all, we had this big kind of debate over duplexes, right? And because it gets confusing how it's defined, and
Yes.
then also when you're talking to developers who want to build one, because there are a lot of small time builders out there, and that's what they want to that's what they want to build. But right now, the way the code is written, it's really difficult for them to do it. But anyway, this guy came in, he wanted to build a triplex actually. And I'm having this whole conversation with him. And the way he was describing it to me is he wants to build 3 townhomes. And I'm like, oh
Hmm.
yeah, no, it's no problem. This is what you need, and this is what you need to do in terms of zoning. Um, like this is the zoning request. We're going to do a zoning map amendment. This is what you need to request if you want to build 3 townhomes. Only he wasn't. He wanted to build a triplex, right? They were just side by side, like they look like
Hmm.
townhomes, but they were not fee simple. And I'm like, all right, well, that's multifamily, and you can't build multifamily in R2, right? So, what? Like, I wish you would have told me that from the beginning,
Yeah.
because I didn't realize that it was multifamily until he showed me a site plan because he hadn't submitted the application. This is basically just like the pre-app process.
Conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, and your parking requirements are different. Your utilities are different because you have a multifamily building. You only need one water meter,
Hmm.
and you may in certain jurisdictions you may only need one electric meter. Um, so it's yeah. So anyway, my suggestion was, hey, a du- let's call a duplex something that is on one piece of land, right? And
Right.
if it's fee simple, then we call it a twin, and then there's no more confusion, right? But anyway, sorry, little tangent there. But um, yeah, the lot width thing, it's the same. 75 feet is wait, yeah. I think now we have 75 feet for a duplex, but I think that's going down to 50.
Okay.
But I it may have been even bigger. But that's also a crazy point too, right? Like if if I could demo my house and build 3 townhomes here, why can't I
Yeah.
just turn my why can't I just turn my house into a triplex?
Yeah. And you're seeing people doing that with single family homes. Like they're
Yeah.
sectioning it off somewhere. Like just imagine your house, a 4 bedroom, and now you're
Mhm.
gonna split it into a duplex.
Right.
And
Two
I'm seeing people doing that.
yeah. Yeah, two-bedroom apartments basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's way cheaper. Instead of all the cost of demolition and then building 2 new homes, um, which if you're a developer doing that, each of those townhomes are going to be 650, 700,000.
Yeah.
By the time you're done. Um, Whereas if I turn this place into 2 apartments, I got to put in a new kitchen. Maybe by the time I'm done, it costs me 75,000 because I probably have to do a bunch of electrical work too to make that
Yeah.
possible. But I'm basically just I'm splitting that down the middle. Like I'm cutting the mortgage in half instead of doubling it.
Yeah. Because
And then,
I remember downtown Kissimmee, they had that duplex for sale, and it was on there for a while because it was what, 740?
well, a duplex for 740 in St. Cloud.
No, downtown Kissimmee.
Oh, in Kissimmee.
Yeah, it was new construction, and I think that thing, I don't know if it sold or not. But to your point, like that construction cost. But I think it finally sold.
Yeah, I would never pay that much to live in downtown Kissimmee. Oh, that's crazy.
And that was for the entire thing, but if you wanted to buy one side, but I think I don't think people would just buy one side of a duplex for 320.
Yeah, I mean, unless it's a condo, you can't, right? You got to buy the whole thing.
A thing. So I was curious
Yeah.
how they, did that one there.
Yeah, because even the approach to ADUs, like you can't, I could section off part of my house and call it an ADU. I'd go through the application process, but it can only be 1 bedroom, and it can't be sold separately. It has to be under single ownership.
Yeah.
I couldn't condoize my house.
Yeah,
um,
then it wouldn't be accessory to anything if you did. She tried to sell it.
Yeah.
It's like it's
Yeah. I'm just, yeah, I'm just at the point now where I'm, I'm realizing that all of these silly distinctions add a lot to the cost of housing. I mean, I guess you know, that became clear a couple of years ago, but um, it's it's wild that almost everyone is still doing it.
yeah.
Um,
And
so
yeah, and then the fascination with tiny homes, tiny
as
homes that are container homes.
yeah, you're right. You're right. It's the new fad. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, everybody was obsessed with shipping containers like 10 years ago.
yeah. And my only concern with a tiny home is, with climate change. Oh, I'm sorry, quotation mark climate change and these severe storms. It's like, can it withstand
Yep.
the strength of a Category 4 hurricane, or as in Mississippi, these tornadoes? Like, could it?
Yeah.
That would be devastation if it could not. And that's the only thing with like these quotation mark mobile home parks, that debate of mobile home versus manufactured home versus modular home, like
Yeah.
the safety of these type of developments. I get it, that's a way to bring down the cost of housing, but how do we make them more sustainable in terms of disaster
Yeah.
friendly? And that's
Yeah.
when you address that with the building code. But then again, it's like this tornado that ripped through Mississippi, was that last weekend? A brick home leveled.
Yep.
So
Yeah. Yeah. Was that, I didn't hear about that. Was that like an F5?
I think it was an EF4.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and yeah, tornadoes, those things are like pop up versus a hurricane. It's slow moving, but it's
Right.
like with a tiny home development, it's like, could it sustain damage from a tornado?
Yeah. No, no way. It's going to fly
Yeah,
away. Like,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And I'm just thinking about, it's like, just the cost of housing. Like, what is the best strategy? To your point of what should we as planners do? How do we advocate for more, I guess you say, attainable housing now?
Yeah.
How do you do that? And the way you do that through policy changes.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. Yeah. No, there's a small tornado here recently, up by, Sanford, I guess, Mount Dora. I mean, it still caused some damage, but it was pretty limited in terms of the area. I guess it only touched down briefly, but enough to, wreck a couple of homes. But yeah, that's the thing. Like living anywhere on the Gulf Coast freaks me out. My neighbors are selling their house and they're moving to Naples, and I can't even imagine. Like I can't even imagine that homeowners insurance. Like they must be paying cash for the house, and
Yeah,
I mean, I guess they've been living here for 20 something years, so they'll have a ton of equity. Like living on the Gulf Coast of Mississippi would freak me out. Like every May, I would just be through September. I would be so anxious because I mean that's like the strongest storms. That's where they're gonna.
yeah,
That's where they always hit. Yeah,
yes.
like
Because if I'm yeah,
go
like if
ahead,
I'm
go
not
ahead.
mistaken, I don't think they rebuilt those homes along, what is that, Ocean or Beach Boulevard? I think most of them have not been rebuilt, and I know they have to be built on stilts and other requirements, but just to think of how these storms have intensified in the last 20 years.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's no way. I mean, at least here in Orlando, if a storm makes landfall on the Gulf Coast, it's 100 miles before of land before it gets here, at a minimum. So it's significantly weakened. But still, like with Hurricane Ian, there's a ton of flooding. To be fair, almost all of it was in the 100-year floodplain that people had built in it. A little bit in the 500-year flood, but not that much. And it's actually, I've been doing so many community meetings lately. Like, just I'm exhausted from it. Not like from having to go to meetings at night. More so just hearing the same thing over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
And it was this one townhome project on the east side of Orlando, and the developer wanted to build 10 townhomes. It was basically that 12 dwelling units an acre, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all the neighbors on the street behind it came out and were like, "You can't build anymore here. You're going to flood our houses." And then, come to find out that their houses
Mm-hmm.
flood regularly.
Oh, wow.
So, every couple of years, every time there's a big storm. And so I, I'm looking in more detail on the map. All these houses were built late 50s through late
Mm-hmm.
60s, right? And when you look at it on the map, it's you can see the wetlands on the map, like you can see the cypress dome and this perfect half moon shape, right? And I'm like, what? Like, where's that? Where's the other half of the wetlands?
Mm-hmm.
And because it should be something resembling a circle.
Yeah.
Um, and all those houses that they were talking about flooding were built right in that missing half circle
Holy.
of the wetlands. And I'm like, oh, well, that's why you are always flooding. And because they were complaining, like, our septic systems aren't working anymore. Our wells are contaminated. I'm like, well, I'm surprised that they lasted as long as they did. Um, but, yeah, I mean, I guess my point there is that, like, we've already done a lot of building in bad places.
Yeah.
And people keep looking to bad places because all the good land is gone. It's already been built on.
So now we want to mitigate the wetlands to build on those.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. The wetlands mitigation. Yeah, definitely got to stop. I don't know how you do that without somebody calling it a taking. You, you know, um, but also at the same time, like, when people's homes are getting wrecked, um, and then they're taking FEMA money, right, for rebuilding.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that FEMA check should be a buyout. Like, your land is now like state or federal land, and that's the new wetlands mitigation, is just buying people out of bad locations. Because otherwise what happens? Like, FEMA either stops paying people, right, or we just wind up like paying out more because more people are building in those places, or they're rebuilding in those places.
And again, most of the good land, it's getting fewer.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's the crazy thing. Like, I don't, you know, um, I guess that's the crazy part about building low density detached single family everywhere, is that you just run out of space really fast, and then the only alternative is to do infill, which is really expensive.
And then trying to maintain the character of that area. Yeah, it's like, we're
Yeah,
brick, but now you're gonna come in with stucco. And we're
yeah,
one story, you're gonna come in and do 2 story.
yeah, 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 and
Like,
that's
yeah, matching the architectural standards for a existing neighborhood or development. Like to consider, just to continue that character.
yeah, yeah, just yeah, as an added complication and an added expense. Um, but yeah, I mean, yeah, I hear people talk about that relentlessly now, about disturbing the character of our neighborhood, and That happened. I was at a meeting down in the Dr. Phillips area. It was probably like a month ago, and it's like 30 people just yelling, and they don't even understand what the application is about,
Yeah.
or why they just want to yell at someone, and it's like, guys, you bought this house like a mile and a half from the front gate of Universal Studios, and you think that this is rural. Like, what? That's straight up the argument that people were making, that like this is a rural area, and these four townhomes are going to disrupt our you know our quality of life, and you're gonna have three bedrooms, so you're gonna have three cars, you're gonna have 12 cars coming and going every day. It's like, you know it's
Yeah.
crazy.
And I guess like growth is scary. And I guess being somewhere 20 years, you expect, I'm sure they didn't expect it to stay that for 30 years, but I get it. Growth is scary. And, townhomes, that misconception that renters or new means it's going to lower our property values, or it's going to, interfere with our quality of life, when in actuality, it's like it's helping your property values
Yeah.
because there's, it's growth happening. There's new development, and it helps you to, continue to maintain your property. Because when you see that newness, you're going to say, I don't want them to have the better, the most, attractive yard on the block. Let me, keep my landscaping up to date.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. So, um, I don't know. It's like when you're thinking, just looking at an area I think Mississippi still is majority rural. Um, when you just look at so much land that hasn't been disturbed here. And I don't know when that growth bug will hit this state. I don't see anytime soon, but if it did, there's just like a lot of raw land here. Even in the city, there's land that has not been touched.
Yeah. I cannot imagine that. I can't even picture it.
Yeah,
um
that's like, yeah. And then if you ever fly over this state and just looking from a plane, you'll see like, wow, a new city could be built overnight because there's just that much raw land available with nothing on it.
yeah. Yeah. That sounds like, I don't know. um
Yeah, and it's on clearance compared to that, what, a million an acre. I was like, whoa. Like you could, I was looking, it was like
yeah.
several acres, and it wasn't even 300,000. I was like, wow, several.
Yeah.
So, but it's just that, I don't know, just that marketing for Mississippi. I don't know what it'll take to get those higher skilled workers here, or for planning to be a thing.
Yeah. And yeah, that part too is such like a chicken and egg thing too, right? Like, where do you even start, like, I guess, attracting the industry and then
Hmm.
attracting the talent at the same time,
Yeah,
because it seems like you need to grow the talent locally. You know what I mean? It needs to be homegrown first.
yeah,
Like, it needs to start maybe like in the university system, and
hmm,
and then I mean, that's basically what North Carolina did, but they started, like, I don't know, what, 50 years ago.
yeah.
And it's only really in the last like 20 years that it's really started to, like, accelerate rapidly. I don't know.
And I guess maybe North Carolina's more progressive than Mississippi. I mean, we just changed the state flag a few years ago, so
It's true. It is a nice
yeah,
looking flag now. I like
it
it.
is. It looks way better than the other one. But yeah, it's like we're hung up on the past. So, and
Yeah.
it's like a culture shock coming back after being in Florida for 7 years. So it's like a culture shock. I was like, oh God, we're accepting the status quo. We're accepting. We're like this. We're okay with this. Wow. But it's just
Yeah.
I'm adapting. I'm adjusting.
I I think about that when I go home sometimes, and like when I lived in Pennsylvania, because I mean it's a place that people leave. You know, like no one moves there from other parts of the country. I mean, it occasionally, but it's rare. Um, so like the people who are still there, like when I go back to visit friends, like they're I don't know, and I'm not trying to insult my friends or anything, but
Yeah.
like their worldview is just like is home. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
That this is they don't notice the changes like I do because I leave and come back, and then things are different. And I guess like the people who have stayed, friends of mine who have stayed, they're comfortable with things like changing, not at all or slowly. That like that's how they like it, for better or worse. Because I mean, I guess like wherever you are, whenever you go home, like there are things that you don't want to change either, even though you don't live there anymore, because that's what you're going home to for. What you're going home to see. You want things to be the same, um, but yeah, sometimes that's like not a good thing at all.
Yeah, to be like this relic in the past. But I do like the Southern hospitality that's here. Um,
Yeah.
just making eye contact, saying good morning,
Hmm.
saying how are you doing, just the little things. Letting somebody in traffic. I had to get used to that again. Like, oh, they're gonna let me. They're gonna let me merge. Oh wow, they're gonna let me in. Just the like. Oh yeah, they do that. Let's.
Yeah, we we uh we went up to Charleston back in I guess the end of September, and I was like, we were driving somewhere in town to go get dinner, and I'm like, am I the fastest guy on the road right now? I'm like, what is happening? And
Yeah,
um and I wasn't mad about it, but yeah, like just yeah, it's yeah, I don't know what it is about this place. Why everybody's in so much of a hurry.
yeah, and yeah. It's like, and then here it's like nobody's in a hurry. We're gonna take our time.
Hmm.
If you see a little old lady, you're gonna get the door for her, help with her bag. Versus, it's
Yeah,
like, oh, that's not my problem. You know,
yeah,
it's just, and that's one thing. Oh, and of course the seasoned food. I can't leave that out. I didn't realize how deprived I was. Uh, Being in Florida, I was like, God, just when I visit Florida, I was like, God, nothing's seasoned here. It's bland. And just being back, I need to stop eating, number one. But just coming here, and I was like, God, everything is seasoned. Just the little things. I was like,
yeah,
it's just the little things. Even chain restaurant. I was like, they use the same recipe at these chains. Um, because my favorite restaurant that's there, I was like, the Hawk. I was like, God, is it just unseasoned now? It's like I can't eat here anymore. So it's just just the little things like the cultural differences. So I
mhm,
guess in a sense, some of those things staying the same, but maybe the mentality, adjusting to the times. Um,
yeah,
like, oh, we'll just wait until it happens versus let's go talk to somebody so we can get this to change and have it happen now versus we're going to wait another 20 years for it to happen.
yeah.
Those are the things that need to change.
Right. Did you notice a difference between Gainesville and Orlando, like culturally?
Oh, yes. Gainesville is like it's Florida without the craziness. Um, I can actually see myself living in Gainesville again.
Yeah.
Like People let you in traffic. They speak to you. It's like culturally, North Central Florida is way different than Central Florida. Because no disrespect to the true homegrown Floridians, but I feel
Yeah.
like the further south you go, common sense goes out the window. Um, I mean, I just don't. I mean, I really want to see a drive-in book in Florida, like the left lane, the
Oh
middle
my
lane,
God.
the right lane. The right lane was designed for slower drivers. So why are you passing me from the shoulder when there's two lanes open? That happened
Oh,
to
I
me
know. I
on
know.
I-4. I was like, then I'll get back to Gainesville. So I was on I-4, two lanes, the middle and the left lane was open. I was in the right lane and I was going, speed limit, what, 60? I was going 65. And then this
Mhm.
guy, I was like, there's two lanes, but he passed me on the shoulder when there was two lanes open. And even on I-75, it's like, you know, I'm in the right lane. You have no reason to try to run me out of the right lane. Use the two other lanes. So it's
Yeah.
like in Gainesville, if you're on Archer Road, which is hella busy around UF,
Hmm.
people will let you in traffic. And, just visiting Gainesville after living in Central Florida, I had to get used to doing that again, because you're so in a hurry. But I'm a courteous driver. I feel like if I let a few people in, I'll get my good deed of the day and it'll get returned to me later. And I
Yeah.
found that has happened to me. I let people in, they let me in. And it's just a common courtesy of as you're getting on the road, like move over so they can merge over. Don't let the guy run into the guardrail. It's just that type of, like let's drive for people other than ourselves because I like my car. I don't want to, tear it up. I want my car to remain dent free.
Yeah.
So just that difference between Gainesville and Central Florida, it's like people, it's still Florida. People, do them, but it's like
Hmm.
it was less of that. We're not in a rush. We want to enjoy. So that's
Yeah.
one thing I did appreciate from my time of being in Gainesville. Just working there, I saw the difference. Like you can see, they're not rushing to get things approved. So you can see the product of their land development code and comp plan and work by just looking at the city, how it looks. And,
Yeah.
my first time like moving to Florida, I moved to Gainesville sight unseen. That was my first time ever going to
Hmm.
Gainesville. And I was like, wow. And I'm not sure what it looked like before. And people said it did look rough before, but whatever they did a really good job. Um, with their land development code, with their comp plan, like you can see the product, like you don't just you can just see the product of what they're doing there. That's one thing I did admire, about the staff there. They made sure that, um, developments, looked how they should look. They should look how they
Yeah.
should look. And then during my time going further south from there in Ocala, we want to get things, so we have to rush it along. We have to get things. So you just notice those slight differences. But Ocala, it's growing.
Yeah. That's a really good point. And thanks for reminding me. Then I have another question about Gainesville. But
Yeah,
I was talking to someone recently out of state, and they were talking about their review times for for applications for development applications, permits. The turnaround time for initial submittal for review for staff was 4 weeks, a month, and then for subsequent review, you know, response to comments, that sort of thing, it would be 3 weeks, depending on the acreage. So the larger the development, the more review time they had. And that's the first time that it occurred to me that here in Florida in general, that the reason that there are so many planning jobs is because of the 10 business day turnaround.
yeah,
Because we, and for anybody listening who doesn't know what we're talking about, when or I guess Francine, if you want to explain it. um,
yeah. So that pesky development review process, where your first, if you're going through site plan subdivision or any type of plan review, that first review cycle is 10 business days, 10 working days. And then the second review cycle or subsequent reviews, it should be around 7 business days when you resubmit. So it's like you're always rushing against the clock to one, meet your deadline for comments, and then to make sure all the other departments have their comments in by that day so that they can get pushed out to the applicant. And then depending on how much time the applicant takes to resubmit those comments. And then whenever they resubmit it, then you have that 7 business day to address those comments. So, wow, so other places they have more time.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Wow.
it's, yeah, I mean, that's the crazy thing about it too, is like you have to have a big staff if you want to get applications out that, if you want to get comments out that quickly on people's applications. So like when, when someone's submitting a subdivision plan, you kind of have to go over it with a fine tooth comb, and you need a lot of eyeballs on it.
I
If you
agree.
want to, if you want to turn that around in 10 business days and not make mistakes, you need to have, 4 or 5, 7 people looking at it all at the same time. And then obviously, like, that's not the only application you're going to have to work on. You're
Yeah.
going to have dozens. So yeah, you got to have a huge staff in order to be able to pull that off, which, is good for us work wise. Um,
Yeah.
but it's job
Yeah.
security, but
Yeah. I
it's,
agree.
but like, but I don't know. To be fair, like, there should be a deadline. There should be some kind of time limit. I don't know if 2 weeks is reasonable, because you're not, you're trading time for money, I guess. And you know, I don't. I've never seen a top to bottom budget for any of the departments that I've worked in, but I wonder how much of the department is actually paid for through application fees. You know, um, like if my team is processing, you know, I don't know, let's just call it 20 large scale future land use map amendments a year, and they're all paying $5,000 for that. That's not paying for a staff of 5. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, there,
So I'm guessing all that money goes to the general fund and every department try to get to that pot. So all the, 'cause I know typically community development or planning departments, they're normally the breadwinner for most general funds. I'm not sure how much of that come from ad valorem taxes. Not sure.
yeah,
That's one thing I do hope to learn in the future is that budget 101. But you're right, like the application fees, that's not paying
right.
or
It's not self sufficient. Yeah.
but I know that general
So,
fund it gets divvied up, and I'm assuming based on your number of applications that you may have, that
mhm.
may be leveraged to justify budgeting for more positions. I know in my last role we were extremely overwhelmed, like over 20 projects to one planner ratio overwhelmed. And
Yeah.
like that level of reviewer that you need for these type of projects, we didn't
Mhm.
have that. We just had to, do what we had to do to get those done. But the main thing is like to avoid mistakes. That's why it's important to have these different expert um, review staff on these projects to avoid mistakes happening and to make sure that what you're approving won't affect the people who are living in that area.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, but to your point, like the applications, I was curious. It's like how busy, like we're um, going 20% over what we took in last year. It's like, can that justify more staff, or do we just, as staff leave, absorb them and repeat that cycle of that work ratio?
Yeah, I mean, and the crazy thing about it too is like as those projects move through the different stages, like they'll come in for preliminary subdivision, and then they'll move on to, you know their engineering, their site development plan, and then, they go to final plat, and at each of those steps, you essentially have like the same people looking at different aspects of it as it moves through. But
Hmm.
once it goes to permitting, you're moving from one application to like 1,000, because once they start, once it's approved and the land's fully entitled and they start selling the lots, and you approve an 800 unit subdivision, then you have 800 permit applications coming in.
Yeah.
Um,
And, yeah. And then you try to explain to people that, now have 800 permits for new single family. What are they going to want? They're going to want accessory structures. You're going to have your fences. You'll have your pools. You're going to have
yes.
your lanai. So you're going to, so it's like, it's never
Yep.
ending until there's
Right.
nothing
And
left to do.
they want to pour a pad for a shed.
Yes.
Yeah, it's uh crazy. Yep. Yeah. Um, yeah, totally wild. But bringing it back to Gainesville for a second. I kind of know the backstory, but how do you wind up there?
Well, super incredible. Long story short,
Hmm.
I was an art major.
For
I
your undergrad, yeah.
For my
Okay.
undergrad, I was an art major. I wanted to do art. Actually, I was in that weird point where I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. I wanted to be a pro wrestler. Look at me. I want to be a pro wrestler. And then I was like, oh darn, I need to go to college. And long story short, after Hurricane Katrina hit, I was like, dang, I need to be enrolled in college. So I went out to Jackson State, and I was like, you know what? I know I had an interest in at one point being a plastic surgeon or forensic
Hmm.
scientist. And then I was like, oh, look all that math this stuff has. I don't like math. And I was like, art, oh, it only has college algebra. And I didn't even know you can major in art. I'm gonna pick art, but I always loved art in grade school. That was my favorite class. And I always considered myself as an artiste or a creative. So I
Yeah.
majored in art with hopes of being like an interaction designer, graphic designer. But then after I graduated, um, oh boy, if you don't have a good portfolio in Mississippi, of course, there weren't as many jobs
Yeah.
available. So, but after I graduated with my bachelor's, I ended up doing the Disney College program. So that's how I fell in love with Florida. And I knew after doing the college program that I'm going to get back to Florida somehow. So, extremely long story short, after my internship ended in 2010, I went back home to Mississippi and I wanted to go to grad school. So, to any listeners out there that wants to get a Master of Fine Arts degree, make sure you do your research because a lot of programs are competitive. Like the schools I applied for, Savannah College of Art and Design, that was my top choice in LSU. Some of those
Yeah.
schools only accept two or less than 10 a year. So
Wow.
I got into SCAD, but just not as a grad student. They accepted me as an undergrad. So I was like, ouch. And LSU, I didn't.
Wait.
Yeah, right?
So wait, you already graduated and SCAD's trying to bring you in as an undergrad?
Yes.
What?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they're like 17,000 a year. Um, so, yeah. So I didn't get into my top choices. Those are only two schools I applied for. Just imagine, I'm lowly just graduated, and my first job out of college was doing security. So I didn't have the money to keep paying these application fees. So
Yeah.
long story short, my friend, I was like, he was like, oh, just go back to Jackson State and get a master's. I was like, in what? I don't want to do mass comm. And then just, wanted to make a difference in my hometown. I saw an urban planner. I was like, what the hell is that? What is an urban planner? Then I looked on the city's website and I saw the job description. And at one point in my life, I did want to do architecture, but math, no math. So I was like,
Yeah.
okay, I'll do urban planning. So, urban planning, did it. So an art major in urban planning. Of course, I had a migraine after every class because, you take these intense classes as an art major. But I get through it because I related it back to art history, like some of the things I learned, and I was able to translate that. And then fast forward, I graduated in 2013 with my master's in planning. couldn't get a job. So during that time, the job market probably sucked, and I applied everywhere. So from my
Wait,
time,
in 2015, you said?
2013, so
2013. Yeah.
2013,
Yep.
could
Yeah.
not,
That
yeah,
bad
could
time.
not get
Yeah.
a job in urban planning. And then entry
Yeah.
level, my advisor told me, like, a master's degree, that's commensurate for 2 years of experience. So like, somebody told him that, because apparently these jobs don't know. I was applying for entry level, like
Yep.
master's in no experience, bachelor's in, just entry level. And I could not get an entry level job, not even as an administrative assistant in a planning department. So,
Yeah.
I was sad. I was like, dang, I went to get a master's, and what am I doing? I'm still working security. Then I ended up working at a state hospital as a ceramics instructor. So, worked security 7 years, and worked at the state hospital, working two or three full time jobs at once, just trying to get to 30,000. So it was a rough time. And then 2017, that's when I was determined. I was like, you know what? This is not living. I can't keep, working all these jobs and trying to, back then I still was pursuing a doctoral degree
Right.
at another school that didn't work out. That's another long story. But in short, in 2017, I was like, you know what? This is my last year. I've given Mississippi, 4 years after I graduated with my master's. I can't get a job. It's time to go. So I applied everywhere, you name it: Hawaii, Alaska, Texas, Alabama. But,
Hmm.
my top choice was Florida, Central Florida.
Yeah.
But anywhere that would happen, Louisiana. So interviewed for a couple gigs with somewhere in Louisiana, then Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Then I interviewed with Gainesville, and I was like, wow, never been to Gainesville, never applied at UF, so I actually didn't know where UF was. But so long story short, I applied there, and they took a shot on me as a planning tech, and I think just someone taking a shot on a kid. I just, well, not really a kid. I was 30. So just imagine getting my career started at 30. So
Yeah.
30, that was me getting my foot in the door in the field. And I kid you not, like I packed up my car, hit the road at like 10:30 at night and arrived at the office for work at 8 o'clock. And I did not know where I was going to live. Like I found my apartment on Craigslist, and I asked my supervisor, "Hey, do you mind if I go on my lunch break to go see where I'm going to live?" So I literally just packed up and just moved to Florida. And with Gainesville, I did. Like I'm forever grateful for the staff there. Like they really, really good people there, and I'm thankful for that knowledge that I gained. So I do advocate for planning technicians, and I'll say that to anyone. Planning
Yeah.
technicians matter because that's
Yeah.
how you get your fundamental experience into the planning profession. You're getting that customer service. You're picking up the zoning code ordinances and just learning. You're like the first point of contact. And then as you're getting your feet wet, you can kind of figure out some things because you're also building relationships with other departments like public works or transportation or the utility. In building, you're working close with
Yeah.
the building department. So I'm thankful for my first director. The first thing she was telling me, like, build relationships, and I've made sure no matter where I work is that you go out and meet people because um, that's our goal, is to serve the public interest. So to be a better public servant, I should, if I don't know how to answer a question, let me figure out on, rather than I just from my experience of getting transferred anywhere, I was like, I
Mhm.
don't want to be that person. So let me do some research. Like, hey, I don't know who you should talk to. Let me get you in contact with the right person. So just things like that. So just working there, and to me, still to this day, I still think that that's probably the best land development code that I've touched in my career. So to this day,
Yeah.
to this day,
Yeah.
it's probably best land development code that I've touched. So and then from there, going on to the next city, great team there as well. So Ocala, big shout out to the people there. Like that, just from working for those in the early phases of my career, what a lot of older planners, I hope that they return to doing, you have to mentor young staff, because just
Yeah.
from those two roles, I was actually taught how to do the job and not just thrown to the wolves. Like, let me show you how. to review this permit, how to review this project, how to correctly cite code, and get you introduced to the comprehensive plan rather than throwing me to the wolves. So I'm grateful for my time in Ocala. Like I felt like my knowledge that I gained as a planning technician and applying that to my role as a planner one, like just going in for reviewing permits like single family accessories and then reviewing like site plans and subdivisions. Like, I wasn't just thrown to the wolves like my first day here. It was like both of those two jobs, I wasn't thrown to the wolves. There was like an onboarding process and, getting me introduced to, your frequently, um, numbers you'll use in the software and the programs and the basics of a staff report, things like that. So I think like with those entry level roles, that level of training should still be there. And then when you get progressed, like my next role, it's like, wow, it's all about building on those foundations that you learned and applying to your next role. So as I moved up, no more training. You just had to figure it out. Figure it out.
Yeah, yeah.
But
I,
yeah,
I, yeah. I worked with people recently and now who were clearly just thrown to the wolves and left to figure things out on their own, and it, it's definitely affected their careers. You know, because they didn't really have that mentoring.
yeah, and that's why in each role that I move to, I want to be that. If not like any of my higher level roles, I never had that official supervisory capacity, but I did not want to leave. Like when I became a planner one, my
Mhm.
since I was a planning technician, I said I would never leave front counter staff hanging because I know what it's like
Yeah,
to, yeah, I know what it's like to be I know what that's like. And then just moving up, like, okay, now I'm a planner two with the county. It's like, okay, I don't want to leave that planner one hanging because I know what it's like. But then again, it's like it's all about mentorship and showing people the ropes because at the end of the day, to me, I don't feel like I'm in competition with anyone because I always tell people like where you want to be is not where I want to be in life. We all have our own individual paths and
yep.
aspirations. Like I'm not
Mhm.
nobody's my competition because you may desire to be here until retirement. Me, I believe in self promotion. So I mean, it's like if I can't get it here, and that's probably why I had to, move around those amount of times. Like I, liked each employer that I worked for, and there's nowhere that I would not return. But it's like it's to the point where I can't sit somewhere more than a certain time frame without a promotion when I know that my work or my work ethic or my performance evaluation should show. Like I know you won't get a promotion every year, but if it's been 3 years, like come on. I don't
Yeah,
want to.
yeah.
I don't
You
want to
know,
retire being entry level.
yep. Yeah, I mean, I tell people like new planners all the time. I'm like, well, the ones who are good, um, don't be a planner one for more than 2 years. If you can't get promoted here, you gotta move to where you can get promoted. Because
Yeah,
otherwise, you'll just get stuck. And because you need to grow like as a planner, you need to like keep increasing your knowledge and your skill set.
yeah,
Because otherwise, you only know, and that's I know you can appreciate this because you've worked in a few different places, but some of the people who I worked with in the past, that's the only jurisdiction they've ever worked for. So that's all they know. They don't, they don't know how things are done anywhere else, or like that things could even work differently. Um,
yes.
it's really,
Right. Notice that, and just seeing where stuff had worked. Like when I first got to the county, I was like, my God. I was like, it felt like when I was moving ahead, it was like I was taking steps backwards. Like it felt like like the technology, just the process. Like, why are we manually assigning reviews when you paid all this money for a software?
oh my gosh, with
Like,
software. Yeah.
yeah, it's like
Yeah.
these software hangups. And then it's like, it got to the point, it's like, God, it was like, keep in mind, I was in Gainesville in 2017. And then the next city in 18, I was like, God, I'm still not there from 18 after, like 19 after. It's like, I still
Yeah.
was not on the level of software and the, you know, forward thinking that I had previously. So it's like it
Yeah, because
depends on where you go, you know.
yeah, because if that sort of technology is not part of the culture, the work culture where you are, like locally, it I mean, local government is the last place it's going to get to. I was working in California in 2016. We were we were still digitizing, like there was still paper everywhere, and like once a week I would have to take the contractors across the street to let them in into the basement, into the annex, to
Yeah.
grab like a whole rack full of documents so that they could scan them and digitize them. But this is in California, and they had just in the Bay Area, and they had just moved to online permitting.
Oh,
So it's frustrating, and would think that it's about money, but it really isn't. It's just about the people who are kind of running the show at the top having different priorities. Like when they're not connected to the front desk in the day to day, and they just know how they've been doing things for the last 30 years, you know,
right.
it's not a priority for them. So it just doesn't get done until there's like a groundswell of pressure, like, we need a new permitting system. Um,
Yeah. And that's why I always believed that why don't you guys talk to the people that's doing the work? You're just picking a program that, may or may not be better.
yeah,
And you're going to take the IT's guy's word for it when he's not the one that's doing the day to day.
yeah,
Instead of, just being in government, that's what I learned no matter where I work. Like, talk to the people that's actually doing the work.
yeah.
Like, please use their feedback before you implement any of these new technologies or if you're thinking about process improvement. And I think just from my experience as a planner or in that realm, that's why I wanted to, kind of pivot just a tad to doing some innovation or strategic initiatives. Um, I just needed just a short break from the
Mhm.
from the day to day, to get your comments due by this date. I needed a break from that. That's when I decided, yeah, I just need a break.
No, I know it turns into such a grind, and I gotta say, like, that I'm kind of at my limit with that. Just the how repetitive it is, like, I mean, all the projects are different, but the
Yeah,
process is always the same. And it's exhausting. Um, like, uh, I think I'm just gonna do it tonight, so I don't have to worry about it in the morning. But like, I have to send out a bunch of public hearing requests tomorrow morning. Um, it's like that kind of thing. It's just tedious, and
it is. And another thing is like depending on which organization that you did, and that's why I do appreciate my experience in Ocala
yeah.
because that's where I felt most like a planner in Ocala because
Mhm.
in Ocala I only did things that a planner would do. Comments, staff report, then support staff would take care of those other functions. Like until
Yeah.
I got to the county, I never saw what happened with a newspaper ad or public hearing requests or doing the mailers or like just uploaded stuff or the title. Like I didn't see any of that until I got to the county, and then it was like when I went back to the city again, St. Cloud. It was like, oh, you do everything. So I guess it depends on those organizations. Like
Yeah.
support staff helps because it takes that pressure off the planner who's already doing all the. Not to say that we're not on our high horse, our pedestal where we shouldn't do it. But I just feel that as you move up, some responsibilities of an entry level staff person should go away because I felt like, when you were out there as entry level staff, you paid your dues. And I just felt like when you get to a certain level, some duties should go away.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's also the case that like when your entry level is when you want to learn how those things work too.
Work.
Um, and you take on other responsibilities. You should, you should shed some. You shouldn't just keep accumulating tasks and responsibilities, because that's how people get burnt out.
Yeah.
Um, but anyway, okay. That is all the time we have for today. But someday soon, we'll have to have you back on. Um, maybe when one of us gets a new job. Um,
Oh yeah,
and
absolutely.
I want to hear about the PhD too. You know, I know about your work, but I don't really know what it is you did. But be a whole nother interesting topic.
Oh yeah, like how to manage the stress of doing that work while doing a stressful
Ex-
job. So yeah,
exactly.
that's a whole nother conversation.
Exactly.
But thank you so
Wild.
much for inviting me on, and it was a pleasure chatting with you this afternoon.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks, Francine.
No problem. Thank you. Have a good day. Bye.